welcome to Grey County Life at Home. I'm one of your hosts, Rhonda Brown, and we have the always fun Miss Mary Jane Murray. Good morning, Mary Jane. How are you today?
Oh, good morning, Rhonda. We have a very, very cold winter day, so I'm just going to stay cozy and warm in my house.
That sounds like a good plan, and I do have to give a shout out because my neighbors are lovely, and Jim and Sheila, they know who they are, they know where I live, and Jim has been spectacular with the snow removal this year. I do get out there, but not as fast as Jim, and he is so appreciated. I gotta say, I went out last night at like 8 o'clock to brush off my van and the bit at the front of my driveway where Jim can't get in there, and it was just insane the amount of snow we've gotten this week. So that I definitely wanted to give a shout out to Jim and Sheila, and also the fact that what else was my update? Good Lord. What else was the update that I wanted to give, Mary Jane?
Georgian Day concert choir.
Right. Oh my goodness. We were just talking about, this lockdown brain and, being forgetful and such. And there I am forgetting that I wanted to comment that next week we're going to have the Georgian Bay Concert Choir on the show. Tonight is actually tomorrow night is our board meeting, and really great group of people and very talented. I don't know if you've ever been to one of their concerts, but it really is an experience and a half. The Messiah is just magical. The last time they did it was the first time I got to see it, and can't recommend getting out to see that more. But yeah, I don't have Charlie with me this week, and I'm kind of glad for that because he'd be up to his ears in snow and my house would be a complete disaster. So, but I'm pretty sure he'll be back for next week's show. And what are your updates this week, Miss Mary Jane?
Well, I have three updates this week with events that are coming up. And one of the things to remember how important it is to recognize Wednesday, February 24th, which is Pink Shirt Day. Now, I'm giving the heads up now because this show won't air until Monday. And it's just a reminder for people to wear a pink shirt. And next Wednesday, when Rhonda and I will both be wearing pink shirts, in recognition of anti-bullying. However, this year, because of the COVID-19, and we're all in lockdown and pandemic and social isolation, it's really focusing on working together and treating others with dignity and respect. And it's an opportunity to lift each other up and to support the organizations that are promoting healthy self-esteem. And I think that's a message we can all get behind. The other one is the International Women's Day virtual event. And that is coming up on Monday, March the 8th, 8 a.m. in the morning. But you do need to pre-register, and the fee is $20. And I've gone to the Women's Day breakfast in past years, so I'm really going to miss the scrambled eggs and the croissants and the fresh fruit. So I thought that I would actually do my own plate and enjoy my breakfast while I'm watching the virtual event. They have great speakers this year. The other one that's coming up is to celebrate Pi Day, which is March 14th. Now, this is an advance update simply because if you are really into pie, pre-order your pie from O'Share or from the Canadian Mental Health Association Fresh Roots Cafe, because this is part of their fundraiser, and it's really amazing to me how creative the fundraising has become during this time. Now, if you're not a pie eater, not everybody is, you get to run 3.14 miles instead. And so pick your choice, pie or run in the cold. I mean, what could be more fun? So this is a three-way, all proceeds from the fundraiser go three ways: United Way of Bruce Gray, O'Share, and of course the Canadian Mental Health Association. These guys just come up with brilliant ideas.
That is a great idea. Who doesn't like pie? And for goodness sakes, if you don't, I know somebody who does. I can definitely help you out there.
And of course, February is a Black History Month. And really, Black history is Canadian history. And there are so many ways in which we have celebrated that in our own community here in Grey County and our own Sound around Black history. But we know that many of the escaped slaves came to our community through the Underground Railroad. And that was because they were fleeing for freedom. And they came to where they felt they were going to be safe. Now, over time, people of color have actually chosen to come to our community. And because of the Black history, the escaped slaves helped to build our community. And now we have people of color coming into our community who just add to that community vibrance and enhancing our community. And one of our special guests today is the very well-known and very friendly face of Verona Jackson. And Verona and her husband Ovid chose us and chose our community to be here. And so we're so grateful to Verona for having made that journey to our community. And welcome, Verona, to the program, and thank you for being on today.
I'm happy to be on too. Thank you for asking me.
So, Verona, can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up?
Yes, both Ovid and I were born in British Guyana at that time. It became Guyana eventually when it got independent. That's about 40 years ago, roughly. Anyway, it was a fairly rural area, my growing up years. I did not live in the city county because of my dad's job. He was an overseer with the government, works in hydraulics, and built these, supervised the building of these big hydraulic lifts. Like there were sluices and dikes and cokers, and all those names come from our heritage, large Dutch heritage in Guyana as well, many Dutch names. And so whenever one of these had to be built, parts of Guyana are below sea level. So the water had to be entrapped and sort of fed to farmers so they would have water for their fields, their animals, crops, whatever. So that was my dad's job. And sometimes I might live in an area for a year, sometimes 2 years, depending on how large the job was to set up those bridging waterways for our farmers. It was a wonderful existence, but I didn't actually make friends because of having to move so often in Guyana. The government, the language, the schooling, everything was British. Everything was British. And I grew up fairly well in terms of having family who cared about us, my mom and dad. My mom, of course, she who must be obeyed. I don't know if you ever watched that show, TV show. She was certainly that. Our backgrounds, it's a very, very multicultural country. We have Black, East Indians, Portuguese, Chinese, white, and our own Aboriginals who were the first settlers. They were called, still are called Amerindians, like American Indians smushed together as a word. I myself, I would say probably at least half Aboriginal. And that's something a lot of people don't know about my heritage, because my dad's mother was pure Aboriginal and his father was a mix of black and white. My mother was Portuguese and black. So I am a blend of all of those races and often very similar to mine. So I grew up in several rural communities until high school, all of my elementary schools, and there were about 7 of them that I attended for a period of a year or half a year or 2 years as it went on. For youth, there was really not a whole lot, so you had to make your own fun. So there were libraries. Sports was huge, whether it was cricket or basketball or athletics. Sports, and when your parents might give you a few coins, you would but meet with girlfriends and say, can we go to the cinema? And we always chose the cheap seats. It was all we could afford. So, and education, very, very important. When I was growing up, parents had to pay for their child to attend high school. Had to pay. And many bright kids did not get to go to high school because parents could not afford. Now, I was very lucky, I think, that there was a countrywide exam that I qualified to write. And a cousin of mine and I, we wrote that exam. And very luckily, what it was, all the high schools would be asked by the government to give a few seats to students who could not pay but had the aptitude to attend the high school. And so, I mean, I know it sounds very strange how that was set up, but it did work. And kids were mixed up. Nobody said who was poor, who wasn't poor. You got these scholarships. I was very fortunate to get one of them. And I know that the year I graduated, it was very good and very bad, because just before I wrote my exams, my father died. He was 41 years old, and a type of flu, I think it was the Asian flu, swept through Guyana. And my dad, who had some other long-standing health issues, he was one of the people who died, I think, from just being such long periods in the backwoods and submerged halfway in water, trying to show people how to construct these waterways for our farmers. Anyway, my escape was reading. I read everything. Mm-hmm. My mother sent me upstairs to clean, and I would be under the bed and I would find a label from a soup can. I would find a piece of paper, and that actually was my nickname when I was growing up, piece of paper. I would leave in the middle of a conversation and go over and pick something up off the floor, piece of paper, to read what it was. Not self-directed, and don't laugh. I loved Zane Grey when I was growing up. Loved Zane Grey and Agatha Christie. And one day, just a little aside, my father looked over, I was doing homework, and he thought, she looks a little too happy. I wonder what's in that book that she's reading. And he came over, and of course, sandwiched right in between the pages of my workbook was the Zane Grey novel. I just love the rollicking sound of the words from it, and and the romances just were so idealistic, hard work, and I mean, it was just, I liked Zane Grey, and I love mysteries, so Agatha Christie was my go-to person. My father told me I wasn't allowed to do that. It was my study time. I had my teacher, and I was about, I would say, just about 10 years old at the time when I was doing this. I had my teacher come and plead with my dad. He said, reading is reading as long as it's not pornography, and it encourages the whole system and the longing to have that kind of communication. So my dad agreed, but on these grounds. I was not allowed to skip a word I did not know. I had to take the time, write it down on the page, because when I was finished my reading, however long that took, I had to get my dictionary out, look up all those words, write the definition on single pieces of paper, which he would clip to a line, well, there were 2 lines running in my bedroom. And once a month, my dad would go up and down that line and quiz me. And I had to know not just the definition, but the spelling and how it would be used in a sentence. Wow. I couldn't say to collaborate means to. No, collaborate had to be used in a way that he could understand its meaning if he didn't know the meaning. So it was a very, I didn't like it, I have to say. I thought it was more a punishment, even though I was allowed to read. So I don't know, do you want to ask me anything at this point?
Well, yes. I mean, this is really good training for you becoming a professor at Georgian College in language. And so this really was a foundation. But my curiosity here is, how did you get from British Guyana to Owen Sound? I mean, that's a journey.
It was a journey. It was a long journey. Actually, we went via England. We lived in England. Our daughter Sonia was born in England. We lived in England, and where Ovid had gotten a very time-sensitive permit, he was allowed to go back to England. And then our son was 3 months old when I joined Ovid, and then our daughter was born there. But there were things happening in London, where we lived. I don't know about the rest of the place. We did travel around a bit, but I didn't know in terms of their politics, but London is where we lived. And I came from a background where work was an honorable thing. Mm-hmm. My dad always said, what you put in your brain, nobody can take away from you. Keep learning, keep reading, and don't be ashamed of work as long as it was legal. Mm-hmm. Don't think you had to go into the firm and be the head of the firm. Well, not right away anyway, but he instilled, and all the parents seemed to do that. You know, it was a society that helped us to actually grow up, as you said, Mary Jane, with certain values. And a lot of those values were linked to education. So anyway, we were there, and I got a really good job right off the bat. I'm going to just interject a little something here. My grandfather, when I was around 9 or 10 years old, we would visit his place, he would visit us. He taught me Pitman's shorthand. Mm. And I mean, I could write it and take notes. He also then, when I was home and going to school, in the evenings, my mom and dad said, you need to learn how to type. So I would ride roughly 4 or 5 miles by myself at that age to go and take typing classes. Now, I don't know what they were setting me up for, but I'll tell you that it helped me in Guyana to get really good jobs. One job, very good, I was secretary to, admin assistant to the Minister of Education in the government. When I got married, I had to give up that job. This was the government's ruling. They did not provide jobs for single women because your husbands were supposed to be your provider. And so I had to give up that job. I mean, it was really strange, but you know, it worked. People got jobs. I mean, I certainly got another job. I went to the British Red Cross, and I was an assistant secretary to the British lady who ran it. And it was a good job. Anyway, that's the job. And I left and went to England. In England, It was not an overly easy life. I had a good job because, again, I had to do a shorthand and typing test. Thank God for my grandfather, right? And my mom. And those two skills, she left me so long waiting for her to come back and take the letter that I had typed up, that I typed it 4 or 5 times in different letter styles, showing off a little. And I got the job, not the one I applied for, which was to be in the typing pool, but to be secretary to the vice president of the engineering firm. Real bump up right then. For some reason, we managed to have a really good life in England with our 2 children. And then one day it dawned on me, because I had been sent home in a taxi from work, that the city of London, there was a labor issue and the city was shut down, and they had to close up all these offices, close down the financial district. All of us had to go home. And you know what that strike was for? The union movement had become really, really strong in England. And England at that point started to turn almost a kind of a socialist leaning, where I felt my job wasn't valued. I mean, this man who was 44, 45 years old, he worked as a stevedore on the wharf. Do you know what that means? Kind of the lading of the ships and unloading and unloading. And he stole a leg of lamb. The spring lamb had just come in. He stole a leg, had it under his jacket, and he was stopped at the gate when he was leaving. The company fired him. The union intervened and said he should have been given a warning and not let go. Well, where I came from, at 45, you know you're not supposed to steal from your employer. The company would not reinstate him, and the union called out a citywide strike in favor of this gentleman who had stolen from his company. I got home that night. My boss sent me home in a taxi. I got home and I said to Ovid, we can't stay here. Let's go back to Guyana. And that's what we were going to do. Then I was reading the paper and I saw that the Canadian government had put out this call. They were looking for technical workers, and Ovid was an auto mechanic. Ovid had been there on a scholarship from Guyana, and he had worked on the huge tractors and Rust and Bucyrus equipment. I have a picture of him, and he looks like a midget beside the wheel of this equipment he was working on. And he had a lot of diesel experience in that. So he said, look, they're looking, why don't I apply? And I said, that's a good, he was accepted right away to immigrate, and that's how we left. They lent us the money for our passage to come to Canada.
This is
and back every penny in time, because there were hiccups and that we had to accommodate. But I wrote people. Anyway,
Verona, I'm just going to interrupt just for a moment here, because this is such a fascinating story. But we're starting to run out of time, and I just wanted to bring forward how important it was and is for you and Ovid to be in our community. I mean, back in 2017, you were awarded the Canadian Community Leadership Award through the Canadian 150. And you have been and Ovid have been an integral part of our community for 50 plus years. So the journey that you've been telling us about is absolutely fascinating. And we actually need an hour to continue your journey.
That's why I was racing ahead and skipping some. But I'll tell you how we got do we have time for me to how we got to Own Sound?
Very quickly, yes.
Okay. 3 months after arriving in Canada, tragedy struck. First, somebody had stolen all of Ovid's tools on the ship coming over. We had to borrow money from a friend in Toronto to replenish those. 3 months later, Ovid had a serious accident on the shop floor. I think there was defective equipment of some kind. He lost an eye. He lost his right eye. It cut the optic nerve. That was game over. Now we had to recalibrate. We can't afford to get a full-time daytime babysitter. We can't pay for that. Ovid isn't working. Ovid applied and was accepted into Teachers College. I mean, you look at your skills, what can I do? He was accepted. He had to attend during the day. I gave up my good government job again, and I worked nights. And as soon as Ovid graduated, now there was a year, nobody would hire him, right? Nobody would hire him when he graduated, until he met Mike Newell and Rossley, two men who looked at him, saw him for the person he was, his abilities, hired him, and we came to Owen Sound. We were going to stay 2 years. Ovid's certificate would be ratified. He could go anywhere with that. Now he was licensed, right, to teach at a high school. And then we stayed. We met the most wonderful people. Students were lovely, amazing young people. When Ovid's dad died and he was running in his very first election for council, his students and my students ran his campaign with the help of a few adults, did everything. They drove over to Toronto in his campaign car with the big signs on it, dropped him off there. He had to go home for his dad's funeral. Oh. I'm telling you, Mary Jane and Rhonda, we did not do anything by ourselves. The people of Grey and Bruce counties in Owen Sound, absolutely, absolutely amazing people, astounding people. We've been here 52 years in this community. And when I was nominated for that award, I tell you, I could have looked easily and named 10 people who could have been nominated for that award. The small communities, people are wonderful. My children thought when we both retired, we were heading down to Toronto to be with them. And we said, that's never going to happen. Never. You can come here when you retire. Yes. Our daughter and son have done all right. And I hope they both come back here when they're retired. Well, their children love it here, want to live.
We have to say thank you so much for coming on the show today and giving us even just a portion of your life history and your story and how you came to Owen Sound. We are so blessed and lucky to have you and Ovid in our community and to help us celebrate Black History Month on Grey County Life.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
The regulars, the guys who keep this place in business. Last week, they had something to celebrate. Jason had just finished university, so they toasted his